You're listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is probably October 11th or 12th that you're listening to this. We are recording this in early, very early. This is a special episode while Jason is away traveling. By this point, he may have shared some photos or something that's been going on with him as he is over in Japan, which I don't think we've mentioned up to this point, that he is actually traveling in Japan during this period of time. But he's joining me today from the past, I guess is the way to put that. Hey.
Through the magic of the internet.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, we are here, and we are celebrating today because this is episode 600 of Starting Zone, which is quite a milestone. You know, the show obviously has been around a really long time, and we wanted to do something special for 600. We didn't get a chance to do anything really super out of the ordinary for 500. And so it just felt like a thing to do because of various circumstances. You know, I was going to be away, so we were going to have to pre-record anyway. It's been a couple years since we did a big anniversary episode. It is the first time that BlizzCon's coming back in person in 4 years. You know, all of these things felt like it was just time. We're on the eve of what we assume is an expansion announcement. It felt like it was time to do something special for 600, and we worked with the WoW team, and we lined up something really special indeed. And I'm glad we were able to do that.
Yeah, it's been quite the ride leading up to 600. We started this whole show way back when Mick Montgomery decided that he was going to be moving on from handling it and running it. That was like on episode, I think 163 or something like that, ages ago. And it's been quite the ride since then. He went to go work at Riot, and we picked up the torch just before Legion launched, and I've been holding that torch every single week since. We have not missed a week. We have produced more episodes in a year than there are weeks in a year, because we would do bonus episodes and call-in shows and all sorts of, guests and that sort of stuff that would kick off. Around BlizzCon time of year like this, we tend to produce like 6 or 7 episodes in 1 month kind of thing when it comes to the amount of content that we put out. So it has been quite the wild ride. It has been a wonderful time. For the first year that we were doing it, we didn't really have a Patreon or anything like that. And Jason's like, hey, you know what? Even if we could just get enough to like cover a little bit of the hosting services, maybe we should bring a Patreon about and see what happens with it. And so we started one up, and thank you so much to everyone who has supported us over the years. It means a lot to us that you have hopped in and put your coin towards helping us out with running the show and keeping the show afloat. And it's been incredible, the ride that we've been on, and it's been really special to share it with all of you. We started this show because we love the game, and we felt like there wasn't another show like it out there that not only kept a positive spin on the game, but also wasn't afraid to sort of call out the flaws here and there in a, hey, maybe this is something you could work on kind of way. And I'd like to think that we can credit ourselves with actually having an impact on the game development itself somewhere along the lines. There have been many a time where we would point things out, and a few weeks later or a month later, changes would happen along the exact same lines of what we said. And if for any Blizz devs or Blizz workers out there who listen, we appreciate you as well and all the hard work you do. Part of why we really push for the ABK news and support for all of you out there is because it means a lot to us that you dedicate your time to making something that we all share and love. And, we want to be sure that we're able to support you as much as we can on that front as well. So it's been a wonderful platform that we've sort of built here, and I'm glad that we're able to use it not only for creating fun and entertaining content on a weekly basis, but also bringing some awareness to the player base about things that are going on around the company. And thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you so much to everyone who supported us.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's very fair to say that we probably would not have made it to 600 without all the support along the way. I mean, we love making the show and talking WoW and stuff, but there's a certain level of that I feel like that you can sort of reasonably do, and beyond that, like, there needs to be more of a feedback loop probably. And so the listeners have been so incredibly enthusiastic and about the show and generous with us with their time, attention, their downloads, their reviews, and their Patreon dollars. Frankly, that we sort of have an obligation. We kind of want to be that sort of voice for what we are doing, and kind of be that touch point for people around the game who want to stay in touch with it. And yeah, we literally could not continue to do it the way we've been doing it if it wasn't for that kind of support in whichever way people choose to or can support the show. I mean, it all adds up for sure. So thank you all for taking this ride with us. And I mean, I remember years ago back in 16 when we took over from Mick and kind of changed the format of the show on a dime, to be honest. Like, we didn't really have the format figured out originally, but we dialed it in kind of fast, and it was a lot different than what Mick was doing. And not to say that I liked Mick's show. That's why I wanted to participate in it when he opened it up, and said, "Hey, who wants to be on the show with me?" But we couldn't do Mick's show. We could only do our show. And that holds true to this day. Sometimes, I hear from people like, why don't you do this? Or why don't you talk about that? It's like, well, I have nothing to say about that. Or like, I don't have that experience. Like that. I cannot speak to that in an intelligent way or in an entertaining way. Initially, like, TSC was a long established show even by that point. And it was a popular show, and Mick had some really dedicated audience members. And a lot of those people did not like where we took the show, and I get that. It was a lot different. It was a big shift for the show, but a lot of people did stick with us, and a lot of people have discovered the show since then, and it's just been incredibly rewarding. We've made so many interesting connections with people all over the world. We have conversations with people from all over the world. We have a relationship with the company that allows us to have conversations with the creative and technical people that work on the game and bring it to us. Mm-hmm. All that stuff is incredibly rewarding, and it's a great perk of doing the work that we do on the show. Putting the show together in a hopefully a thoughtful way, a deliberate way, and trying to have these conversations that we're having and keep people in the loop about the game. And it does get reciprocated, and that's awesome, man. I mean, I don't think that's not what we set out really to do back in 2016, but it was sort of just a natural outgrowth, I think, of the consistent work that we've put into the show. It was just kind of bound to happen, but that doesn't make it any less gratifying, I guess. Right. Like, it's just so cool. We've had such a fun ride doing the show over the years, and, I'm not going to lie. There were definitely times where it seemed like maybe it was time to think about wrapping it up or something. With the state of the game, the conversations around the game, the state of the company that produces the game. I mean, we've been through some tough times in the last few years. And I mean, we're both getting older, and your responsibilities and your obligations and just your priorities shift alongside that. I'm not the same person I was in 2016 in a lot of ways, but I do still have a lot of the same interests and values and stuff. So I think that obviously that keeps the show consistent on some level, but to keep it going for as long as we have, sometimes it doesn't even seem like it in a way. It's like, wow, it's really been that long. It's really been that many episodes. It's kind of weird, but it's been a privilege to bring the show to all of you listening. And so thank you all so much for hanging in there with us through thick and thin, through the good times and the bad times, through, from the highs of like mid Legion to the lows of, BFA launch or Shadowlands year one, and then back up to, Dragonflight even, I would say. I think the game's in such a good place, and I'm excited about the future of it. I want to keep talking about it and keep sharing our experiences with you all and hearing from all of you about your experiences as well. I don't know. I don't feel, I mean, I think we currently still have this sort of puzzle to solve about scheduling, actually recording the show. But beyond that, I mean, I feel like the future of the game is bright, which means the future of the show is bright. And I consider it a privilege to work on the show. You know, I feel like this is a thing that the community needs and that our audience needs. And I feel like the fact that people stick with us as we continue to produce it means a lot. So thank you all.
Yeah, it's been quite the ride. And I will, I guess, cap off this episode 600 with announcing that we had a guest. That's what's coming up. We recorded this past week with the one and only Terran Gregory. Big fan favorite on the show. Someone who we talked about how he got started. Man, it was ages ago. Ages ago, we talked with him about how he got started in the industry in general and what it was like, I guess, finding his way towards Blizzard and then ending up at Blizzard and what that journey was like. So we wanted another chance to talk with him, bring him back on, and be able to actually speak with him about, you know, I guess, his perspective on gaming in general and how his positions evolved at the company and all sorts of really interesting, fun anecdotes that will come along with that. Because if anyone can spin a yarn and tell a tale, it is certainly Terran Gregory. So by all means, I think you all will really enjoy what we have ahead. All right, so welcome, Terran. I know that with these typical formats, I normally jump in right away with a question, but I'm going to let Jason take the lead on this.
All right, so today we're celebrating Starting Zone episode 600, and we want to do something special. And what could be more special than returning to the show, one of our favorite guests, a friend of the show for many years, Mr. Terran Gregory. Terran, welcome back to the Starting Zone.
Thank you for having me. It's really, really great to be having the chance to talk with both of you again.
It's a privilege. It's an honor. Thank you so much for all of your generosity to the show over the years and to the WoW community at large. I mean, it's not just us specifically. But, you know, you seem to be a fan favorite. And so we're really glad to be able to sit down and chat with you. And it's been a long time. The last time you were on the show was episode 239 back in Legion days. We're now
those are weeks, right? Like every digit is a week.
Yeah, we do one show a week basically, and a little bit more. So yeah, it's been a few episodes since the last time we spoke. And so a lot of stuff is different with the game, with the technology that, you know, holds the game up and supports it and allows you to tell stories within it. Mm-hmm. And stuff is different with the way that your job role has evolved and your approach to how you do your job. So that's kind of the stuff that we want to get into with you.
Awesome.
Because it's been so long. So let's go back. I want to kind of do this in sort of a chronological order. Since the last time we spoke, one of the biggest, changes that we've seen with the in-game cinematics, like an obvious thing with the tech around it, is like obviously models get better all the time, fidelity gets better, animations get better, just even like camera moves and edits get better. Mm-hmm. Going back to BFA, that was the first time we saw player character models getting used in that space. That was the first time ever. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about like what it took to make that happen and what your approach is when you incorporate a player character into the main story and how you use that in the in-game cinematics?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, last time we spoke around Legion timeframe, that's like 7 years, and 7 years in game development time. I mean, that's a lot of rings of a tree already, let alone all the rings going back to the beginning of World of Warcraft and this engine that was ultimately a grandchild of Warcraft 3 technologically. It's got roots going all the way down to the center of the earth. But I'd actually did a presentation not too long ago for the team where it was like, hey, the history of the cinematics in World of Warcraft. And it showed all these different touch points, all the way back to the first cinematic that came out, the fly-throughs when you create a new player character, when, like, the humans of Stormwind, right? Like that's really some of the first in-game cutscenes in the game. But then there weren't many up until the Wrathgate being this moonshot out of nowhere that nobody was expecting. And I've been told time and time again that people were just going along doing their thing, thinking they knew what World of Warcraft was, and then bam, it just jumped right out of the shadows and said, "Oh my gosh, this is something different now. This is sparking my mind." And less talked about than the Wrathgate is usually how Cataclysm, the very next expansion, suddenly exploded with all of these designer cutscenes. The quest designers themselves were using the vehicle technology that had come along with Wintergrasp, and they were using the seats of the vehicles invisibly to push and pull the camera around. And they were so enamored with being able to do these cutscenes that they ended up everywhere, right? On the Uldum and all these, the campaigns of like little cinematic expressions. But it was kind of like when you get into the candy and you eat too much and you kind of get the bellyache afterwards. That was like, whoa, we might have gone too hard on the new toy a little bit, but found a good balance in that, and having these designer cutscenes throughout the next couple expansions, simultaneous to the development of the in-game cinematic pipeline over the next couple. And I really feel that it all started coming together around the end of Warlords and into Legion. And we started seeing in Legion a couple of those real-time cutscenes. It was like the flashbacks with Illidan Origins. There was a triad of those, and that's really where the BFA question started. Was that we hadn't had dedicated artists that we call cinematic designers, kind of dedicated to this craft. It was usually done on the fly by whichever designer had the opportunity to get into the engine and do it. But this is when we started having specifically dedicated people of a cinematic design discipline come in and do these scenes with Illidan's Origins. And it worked. It worked really, really well. And so that put the idea in our mind, just like, phasing in phasing bug in Burning Crusade put into mind phasing as a feature for Wrath of the Lich King. Every time something comes up, it's like, how do we use this next time? And that's where Battle for Azeroth really came about, is that when it opened up, there was a lot more of these cutscenes that were designed by artists whose entire discipline is to get into the engine, use it as a cinematic tool, and express it accordingly. And now that we're in a real-time space using the game engine to do this, we can include the player character, which has been very difficult in the FMV videos that we've used classically since Warcraft 3, right? We've always had FMV, but those are really difficult to put a dynamic character into. So new talent, capabilities at that time, they were pretty much the same tools and technology that we'd had since Mists of Pandaria, when the first client scripted scenes started showing up. But starting not long after that, we realized that we're going to need better capabilities in the game engine for these dedicated cinematic designers. And so there has been some development of like in-game tools to have more of a timeline type control and be able to manipulate the scenes and create these real-time cutscenes, specifically going into Shadowlands. And the tool is more of a matter of optimization and empowering the artist to be able to do these scenes, better, more efficiently. And that's why we saw the number of them in Shadowlands grew rapidly. And then just naturally over time, refinements, getting better interacting with the tool, working out how and when we start them, when we work on them. And we've just seen their complexity and their expression just get more and more wonderful throughout the last couple expansions, especially going into Dragonflight. And there's a lot of new tools in Dragonflight, but I'll pass it back to you before I get ahead of you.
So pretty much like it's up to the, individual designers to say, okay, I think it's a good idea to have an in-game cinematic here that would incorporate the player character. Basically, it's more up to, individual designers working on a quest line or a zone or something than maybe some top down kind of, okay, we're going to incorporate the player character here and there and over here.
Right. Little column A, little column B. There are many layers in World of Warcraft. There's the local stories on the ground that are everywhere, and then there's kind of the main campaign, and then there's on top of that like the main antagonist, protagonist, the people on the box, right? And each one of these has a different approach in the way that we ideate, implement, and so it really comes down to what type of content, what kind of moment, what does it necessitate, what does it demand. And so sometimes, there's heavy narrative involvement in what we need to do. And other times it is more that the world building group or the quest design group and content group will be building their content, and they have requests or desire like, oh, it'd be really cool or it'd be really helpful if a cutscene could really sell this moment or this moment or this moment. And then they'll meet and collaborate with the cinematic design crew and sometimes myself on what does that entail and how, what's the best way to go about that. But really, it's a team effort with a lot of different ways to deliver a lot of different types of content, which is, it's always WoW's strength, is that just the breadth of the world and how many different things are going on. It really, by necessity, can't be intrinsically unilateral or top down. There's a lot of necessity of collaboration and working together to create a cogent experience.
All right. As far as Dragonflight goes, I mean, we've obviously seen more in-game cinematics, we think, than ever. Are we right in assuming that this is a tool that, as you talked about back in Cataclysm, had been used a fair amount, that it is just continuing to be, used in more and more different ways? I've really enjoyed a lot of the small storylines even that are told in this sort of way that you can really connect with during Dragonflight. So is this something that it just is more inside this expansion?
Yeah, no, I love the format of being able to talk to you guys because we have a little more time to get into some of the nit and gritty, right? Yeah. Which I love because I don't get the opportunity to do so all the time. But there are always there's a host of different types of content that we can deliver, right? There's the gameplay, there's the stay a while and listens that, when you click on a character and they'll just talk to you for a while, and that's, refreshing because you just get a longer download. And then we have the real-time cutscenes, which again have been there for a long time, but have improved, over the years as a result of tooling and technology. And then we had the IGCs, the in-game cinematics, which were our full motion videos. But in the emergence of in the middle of Shadowlands, we saw something kind of occupy the middle space there, which was the cinematic animation of real-time cutscenes. And they ended up coming out so well that some people can't perceive the distinction between the IGCs and what we call the animated real times. And so it can absolutely blow that impression of like, whoa, we went from 5 IGCs to, I don't know, I'm just throwing out numbers here. I don't hold me to account to any numbers, right? But we went from 5 to 12. Oh my gosh, right? Like, where is all this content coming from? But it's really new capabilities, new team members, smart implementation of the right medium for the right moment for the right time. But Dragonflight definitely benefited from the very first of these animated real-time scenes was Anduin holding the line in the Maw intro. It was very early and it came out of nowhere, and people noticed that their player character, is right there, and Anduin turns to the player character, go, and oh my gosh, he just told me, whoa, right? And so that was kind of the tip of the rocket where we're like, can we get this to work? And then it worked. And we're like, oh my gosh. And I think we did one for every patch. There was a conversation between Anduin and Sylvanas. And then we were feeling emboldened to the entire summary judgment of Sylvanas Windrunner at the end of 9.2. That was all done in real time. All right. The conversation with the Arbiter, and then later the conversation between Tyrande and Sylvanas. And then in those epilogues in 9.2.5, we saw the moment with the Winter Queen and Tyrande and Lillian Voss and Kalia Menethil, and there was one more with Anduin and Sylvanas. All of these were done using this new cinematic animation in real time. And it's a wonderful way for us to be able to use just the right amount of our resources to create a really compelling narrative experience while still keeping our flashier moments for when they need to really, really, crash the gong, so to speak. So it's not just there was a lot more, and all the tech dev that we did throughout Shadowlands really came to the fore in Dragonflight. And there were new capabilities like depth of field, like we were able to blur out a little bit of the background, which that's another reason why which one's IGC and which one's the animated real time. It's because some tools did come online right at the right time to kind of blur the line, pun on words, blur the lines between the two mediums. So there's been a lot of that. And
it's awesome. I didn't really realize
that came together.
that there was that the stuff was real time. That a lot of it is real time now because the presentation is so high level, compared to what we're accustomed to in the game, right? Like the way stories are told in the game. Yeah, the gameplay kind of drops out, and you cut to this presentation, and the camera moves around and stuff, and you go, "Well, this must be an in-game cutscene." But
yeah, and I know that it's easy to point to. Oh, what's the tool that unlocked this? But I would definitely say that a lot of work and a lot of effort by a lot of very talented people, our technology artists, our animators, our cinematic designers, our production staff. they all came together with this initiative and really put a lot of work into creating a situation in which this work can be done. And then the rest was the artistry, right? We still have incredible animators and incredible artists working on the content themselves. So it's really not a matter of, hey, we made a tool and we pushed the button. It's like, no, that we've emboldened our capabilities. But really what you're seeing is the hard work and effort of dozens of artists that just bring their work to the fore and have created a really compelling experience for Dragonflight.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you a question about, sort of new tools or anything that's come along, but you kind of summed it up there, I think. I mean, is that the most exciting new thing in the toolbox these days? Is that because, I mean, we've seen like model fidelity just shoot through the roof over the last, 2-3 expansions since we last spoke. The shots seem a lot more complex. The movies are longer, it seems like, in a lot of cases, and there's more shots. There's just more stuff going on. So is that like the most exciting new tool in the toolbox? And do you ever still have people like running around on live servers to capture footage so you can cut it back into the movie?
I mean, I'm always so excited about new tools in the toolbox because it just means that we can be adaptive and smart in the development of video games, which anybody knows, video game development is some of the hardest stuff you can do in the world. I think, it's very, very, very challenging. So the more tools in the kit you have, the better you are to manage any of these situations. I think that as new things come online, they can also adapt to philosophies or open up doors that you just didn't have before, because the in-game cinematics, pre-rendered full motion videos, they're beautiful and they're gorgeous and they're incredible, but they're also generally having to be shorter because of that complexity. And what we've found with these opportunities of these real-time cutscenes that we can now animate is that we were absolutely emboldened to let these moments breathe a bit more. We could actually give a sense of like, dude, don't be in a rush, right? Like give it the time that it really needs to land dramatically. Whereas sometimes there are pressures, especially when content is landing between high impact content. There's the pressure to get on because some people are pushing escape if it lasts too long. There's also the pressure of just like, hey, we can't let it feel like we're just meandering, and we gotta keep it utterly crystal, which is still good advice. But just like stay a while and listens, there's a time and a place for, I just want to hear the yarn being spun, right? And I think that we really saw that coming into play in the patches so far, like Abyssian and Emberthal's encounter on the Forbidden Reach. Like that was a scene that I worked with Christy Golden on, and we were allowed to really give it the time it needed to not feel like it was in a rush. So yeah, the new tools, I'm always excited. Something else about that, where the tools will take us. People ask me, working on World of Warcraft as long as I have, like, you ever feel like it's the same old? And I say no. And it's because it is constantly reinventing itself, right? Like every day is a different challenge, it's a new horizon where I'm not doing as you've been asking, I'm not doing nearly the same thing that I was doing when I started, nor am I doing the same thing that was 4 years ago. These new capabilities come online. The horizons of Warcraft spread broader. The team brings more and more ideas to the table, and it just feels like every expansion I've made of the 10 that I've worked on, everyone feels new. Everyone feels like something else, and never like we're just retreading. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I had another question that sort of goes along that line about what you were saying about sort of teasing these stories out in the patches or just having more room to breathe with them. Like, we're getting more overall content in Dragonflight, right? We're getting more content releases more rapidly than we've ever really been accustomed to. Maybe, I guess you could argue maybe the days of vanilla when, we had 12 patches in 2 years. But other than that, this is kind of a different schedule, a different philosophy seemingly. So there's a lot of opportunities to drop in more stories. One thing we talk about on the show all the time was during BFA, the war campaign was a really cool story once it was all unfolded, but we would forget where we were in the story because of the release schedule.
Right
now in Dragonflight, like, we're getting these patch drops every like 2 months that have sometimes self-contained stories, sometimes stories that, advance the main narrative, just all different scales of storytelling. Like, when it comes to, opportunities to tell different stories, or like, how do you manage the the workload about stuff like this? How is the team how is the team rising to the challenge of like, hey, we're going to have a patch every 2 months.
Right.
Like we want to advance these story threads. We want, a cinematic for this or whatever the case may be. Like,
Yep.
What is it like slotting your team into that kind of new reality for how WoW gets published, really?
Oh, absolutely. I loved your anecdote about vanilla because, as we were saying earlier, World of Warcraft's long tail of history has had to be one that there's no manual, right? Like for MMOs, right? The longer this goes on, the more we're in an uncharted space. What do we do next, right? And it's always a matter of looking, learning, listening, and then evolving. And I think Vanilla's patch structure was one where they were just trying things, right? Like some of those were grand with a new what was it? 10-person Zul'Gurub, right? Like boom, Zul'Gurub, right? But other ones were like, hey, it's just this little thing over here, right? Like they ranged from very large updates to just like little minor updates, and that was experimentation and kind of trying it out. And I think that's not going to change. I think the cadence that we're doing right now, we've been very happy with how Dragonflight has been received and how it's engaging the players, and that's our number one goal. It's not a matter of X content by Y. It's a matter of keeping our players, delighted, engaged, and loving World of Warcraft. But in shifting to this, ambitious model and giving it a shot and seeing how it goes, I think there's been tremendous benefits to narrative and our ability that when we're charting out our storylines, we don't feel as burdened with, all right, how are we going to make sure they remember what happened there? Or, man, we need to wrap all of that up here, and really try to squeeze it in there. And then next time, where were we? And then you burn a lot of time on exposition and build up. Whereas we have these opportunities now to create this narrative heartbeat that kind of reminds people, hey, this is what's going on. Hey, the world has moved forward a little bit. Hey, something has happened that changes the math of things. And that's definitely been in the rooms where we discuss these structures and these ambitions, and a very powerful tool. But, we will continue to experiment, adapt, change the model as we go forward to try to find exactly what the best balance between what the team can build with the quality that everyone expects, and the endless and insatiable, content demand of our enthusiastic audience and ourselves, right? Like, because we're all players as well.
Yeah, it can't be easy trying to choose which storylines or which pieces of story get highlighted in that sort of way, and which ones need to either take a back seat for a bit or just aren't as emphasized as a team, right? There must be some very difficult decisions and meetings that happen every now and then where you're like, this is really neat and that's really neat, but we only have this much time and we can't do both of them, so what are we doing?
Oh, man. I think that is, as an artist working adjacent to the narrative of World of Warcraft, one of the greatest challenges is exactly that. The world is so large and it is full of so many compelling characters and so many compelling stories that at the end of the day, you only get, an update with a amount of content that has to at some point feature specific things, right? And it definitely feels like a Sophie's choice constantly is like, oh, we could do that, but then we don't do this. And yeah, that's eternal. And I think that in talking with the crew about stuff like that, it's like all we can do really is do our best to tell the best story we can with what the best instinct in the moment is, because that's what matters, delivering a solid, compelling experience. The rest will come in time. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, and I have to imagine that there's some storylines or some little explorations of characters, maybe not primary characters, but side characters that sort of get sidelined or set on a shelf for a future update. Hopefully at some point we could maybe do this because I want to explore this relationship or this adventure or whatever this is, but we need to do it justice. So we'll just put it there for now and we'll come back to it at some point.
And I think what we've seen is that there are multiple content pipelines that have spun up that have kind of taken up the sword on that, like the heritage armor The Heritage Armor quest lines have very much been that narrative opportunity to go back and touch on storylines that have not been, touched on in a long time. And we've seen several of those come out to kind of like, oh man, yeah, remember when that happened? Like, it's just incredible. And so the content team, the quest team, they love working on that content. They love diving into the deep lore with the narrative crew and just finding those bits and making sure that the things can float up and again reinforce this idea of this living world. And they've done such an incredible job on all of that stuff lately. Just loving it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm glad you mentioned that because when you were speaking about like, where to find these little beats or whatever, I think some of the best storytelling in the game in recent years has been through the Heritage storylines, and like the Blood Elf one in particular. I put that over on the show all the time. It's like, if you have a Blood Elf, like go do this quest line. Like, it's so good. If you played Warcraft 3, if you have a Blood Elf, like just go do it. Even if you don't care about the armor. Yeah. Like, I mean, they've just been so well done over the years, and it's a great opportunity to inject this kind of like evergreen story or something that's sort of disconnected from mainstream continuity, so the player can do it whenever and it's satisfying, and that's a thing that I'm always pounding the drum for that on the show.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. All right, so when we last spoke to you, your official job title was Cinematic Director, World of Warcraft, on the story and franchise development team. Mm-hmm. In the last 2 years, 15 years after sort of the Black Temple trailer, you've moved on to the WoW team itself, first as lead cinematic narrative designer and now as cinematic narrative director. Can you talk a little bit about what that transition's been like for you?
Right. Oh, absolutely. So far in the show, we've discussed, in-game cinematics, real-time cinematics, but truth is, man, there is a menagerie, right? Like Blizzard's DNA, I think back to its very earliest days, has had this cinematic expression that for those who lived through those early eras, I'm not old, but StarCraft, Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, right? Like just burned into my memory, like the ships on the ocean rising up and the cannons coming out of the castle wall. It's like, that's fundamental core memory, stuff that goes right there in the brain. And as a result, Blizzard grew up as a game company who's absolutely had a defining pillar in its cinematic expression. And there were these high-end CGI that developed along with the industry. We saw them go from StarCraft 2 to Warcraft 3. Suddenly they were making these movies that looked like they could go toe-to-toe with Hollywood, no problem. And it's like, wow, this is incredible. And that's been a legacy and a fundamental design of Blizzard. But an interesting to think about in hindsight that just feels so plainly obvious today, and yet there was this demarcated point, and that's that World of Warcraft was Blizzard's first point of view game. Everything that Blizzard had made before then was either isometric or side scroller. It was the first one that you were in the world looking around. Okay, what? Right? Like, there's been so many since then, but oh no, that was the inflection point. And in some ways, that's why the early game didn't have a whole lot of cutscenes, because they hadn't done in-game cutscenes. They had a very, very talented department that was dedicated to making the CGI for StarCraft and the CGI for Warcraft and the CGI for Diablo. And then they had a game team who was making the in-game thing. But there was kind of, a little bit of a separation in terms of talent, capability, skills, and whatnot. But they worked very closely together and created incredible experiences together, and developed the tales as I hear stories of really making those games work. Well, when I came in and I was doing in-game cinematics in this new engine, newish at the time when I came in, hey, we can get in here. We can run around. I made my machinima with it, and everyone's like, whoa, what? Do you want to come do that for Blizzard? And I'm like, of course. Any day of the week. But then there's the question of where do I fit? I was in the video department initially and doing trailers and cutting that together because I was a video editor. But then as the Wrathgate came online, they were like, okay, where do you belong? And I think even at that time, I was like, I work in the game, but they were like, no, we should definitely have you over here. And that, I think that was the right call, because we do need the support and, the artists who understand the cinematic discipline and the medium. And so being over in story and franchise development was able to help WoW in-game cinematics kind of develop into what it is today. But I think part of me had always felt that like, I want to be in it. I want to be in the core development, especially after the departure of, Metzen in 2016 and some of the other creatives. When I was in story and franchise, it kind of felt like, I want to be over there helping to kind of fill the gap, and really, really maintain that sense of what we were able to do before. And after I knocked on the door long enough, they were like, all right, yeah, cool. And I got to come over first as a lead cinematic narrative designer. And then not too long after that was boosted to cinematic narrative director. And that's kind of the story of how that came about.
Very neat. So like, what, if you were trying to describe what your day-to-day responsibility or task is, and what would that sort of be inside your role currently?
Yeah. It's ever evolving and changing, but I think over the last couple expansions, or even going back as far as Legion, really, there was a change and a shift in people who were present, whether Metzen's departure, and even at that time, I started doing a bit more of the story development and writing. Or at least overseeing writing and working with other talented writers and collaborators on these projects, and not just directing the cinematics. And that kind of ended up doing an eventual crossover where in more recent years, I have started delegating more of the actual, cinematography and directing in a filmic sense, to some very talented collaborators that I work with. And I focus mostly on the structural design of how do we paint with this brush, as you were mentioning earlier, like across these patches and across these cinematics and these opportunities and where the story happens, what gets picked, how does it get made, how do we ensure that we're supporting both the meta narrative, the campaign, and in instances where we need to support the heritage armor or the local stories, right? Like, but all of that is much more of a balance of trying to be responsible and meet that out. And one example that I can talk about is like the incarnates in Dragonflight. Like a lot of their tale is told through the cinematics, and that was an initiative that I worked on with many of the others on narrative, in charting out exactly, okay, here they are. This is what we learn about them. This is when we learn about them. This is what's important. This is how it turns, right? Like I am involved and working in working the math, right? I often, with all that information, I can set my short version is I'm doing the math, right? Up on the whiteboard and trying to make the equation work, and reconcile the variables, which makes it sound very technical. And in game development, sometimes it's weird that creative can be very technical. It's a matter of working out the solutions and making sure the Tetris pieces fit. But that doesn't preclude the idea that, inspiration and being able to be a storyteller. And but World of Warcraft is ultimately a collaborative effort, and it's always a chorus of the voices on the team. Storytelling. I think Metzen once said something like this. I might be paraphrasing, but story is the fundamental currency of all human interaction. And when you think about it that way, every talented artist on the World of Warcraft team is a storyteller in their own right. There's a story behind every prop. There's a story behind every POI. There's a story behind every item, quest line, NPC, cinematic, right? And we're all coming together, and really, it's never about one person's vision. It's about us as a crew trying to create the best experience we can and live up to the legacy of what World of Warcraft means to the people who play it and love it.
Awesome. I had a question along those lines that you kind of just already answered without me asking it, which was about sort of your degree of input into the narrative direction of WoW, right? And how that has kind of changed over the years as your role evolved. But I think you pretty much summed that part of it up there, and just sort of getting more onto the team that's actually shaping the narrative. Now, I want to ask. I do know that game development is very collaborative, as we know from the outside, and nothing in games gets built, by, at least at the scale of WoW, gets built by a person, and nothing about WoW or the Warcraft franchise gets done and told by one person. But now that you've moved from story and franchise development to the WoW team, do you get to kind of express your stuff a bit more? Is there a particular thing that you like to try to inject into the stories that you get to tell, or are there certain types of voices that now you have the opportunity to amplify, since you kind of have a seat at the table and say, okay, yeah, like this is a direction we want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm often asked throughout the years, right? How much input do you have in any given thing? And the answer is usually, even now, right? It depends, right? There's going to be things that come in that have been written, say, by someone working in design or someone working in narrative, or, in the modern day, Chris is like, hey, I need this. We're like, okay, cool, right? But somewhere between that, there's still just the tying factor of trying to make sure that everything flows and gets done the way it does. And in that constellation, I have had opportunities, along with many other writers or other narrative designers that I've worked with, to actually be kind of primary screenwriter on several of the cinematics. And in those incidences, I do like being able to just get in there and capture the essence of what we're doing. But those are by no means the majority, right? Like these, I can't ever point to and be like, oh, that was my content. Like, and I prefer not to, right? I prefer to point to the crew and be like, hey, we did this. And as far as a singular voice, this is just me. I don't find myself often saying, I have a voice that I need to get out there. I actually do much prefer to be like, I'm a curator. I am a steward of like making sure that the voice of Warcraft, right, and the voice of kind of new era, the new age of, we have a lot of new employees, younger employees who have, are bringing us insights and new perspectives on the world. And that's utterly, utterly critical to meet the moment today. And so we always have room. I have room for improvement, right? Like working every day to try to be a good part of that process, so to speak.
So what about your role? Do you feel like, how do you manage your role? Are you more of a hands-on person who sort of gets into the trenches and likes to really work with the team directing a video in that sort of way? Or are you more standing back, letting the team operate, conducting meetings, seeing overview? We had a chat recently with Josh Allen, and he
I love Josh.
Yeah, he's great. And he was sort of talking about over the years seeing different people in different roles and how there's no wrong way to do that role, to do a directing role, but how different people would operate in different ways. And so do you find you're someone who likes to get into like an editing suite or get into a suite and actually like work on something or be there over someone's shoulder working with someone collaborating that way? Or are you someone who sort of steps back a little bit more?
I think that every artist who goes on a journey that ultimately ends up being responsible for large projects or other artists goes through their own painful journey of peeling your fingers off of the steering wheel. And I think that, I'm still on that journey right now, and more. Yes, I have to sometimes fight my instinct to be like, I just want to get into Premiere and I just want to play with these things because it's in my DNA. No. It's all good. But, I also find that every time I'm able to not, step back and just let it go, that, you'll actually see the eminent, talent and rise around you. The space will always be filled. And so I am very energetic. I am very like exuberant. I think anyone who knows me at BlizzCon, like you get me spinning the yarn and just like the energy comes out almost to the point where I'm like, dude, yeah, like, ooh, got to get that under control, which is understandable. But I love working with everyone, collaborating one-on-one, talking through, jamming through, creating guidance. And as things continue to evolve, I am definitely much more trying to ensure that the artists are set up to succeed, and that my responsibility is to more so the fidelity of the franchise and making sure that the content that we are developing, is rising to what it needs to be.
Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of things you must the amount of moments you must have of learning from these other people doing these things that you're so hyped up to do. I know from my experience inside a technical field and a design field that often I think I have a great idea, and then someone's doing the exact same idea and they do it in a completely different way. And I'm like, that was really neat. I had no idea you could do it that way, or that this would work that way, or you came at that from a totally different angle. And I love it. Like, that must just be like a daily occurrence with this team, I imagine.
There's a really funny occurrence that is almost a loop of that where, I was in the video department for years, back in the aughts. And of course, having moved into cinematics and moved to the game team, there's still a video department. They're making our trailers. They're great at what they do. I love when they got access to our new timeline tool tech. And that's why you see in Dragonflight, the gameplay trailers, they just look like they took a quantum leap forward because they've been unblocked, right? The capabilities of their artists are just, hey, you have the paintbrush now, make this incredible content. And we've been seeing that in Dragonflight's gameplay trailers every single time. But in talking to some of those artists, they will mention to me like, oh, I was looking at this tool and it said published by you. Like, I'm like, whoa, yeah, no, I made that tool in Lua like 15 years ago. They're like, wait, you were in video? Like, they didn't know. And they're like, wait, whoa, that's incredible. And I'm like, yeah. And then I'll offhandedly mention like, yeah, are you using this thing? And they're like, wait, what? Right. And so there's almost a reciprocal, like generational, like, I think the eras have shifted so much that some lost lore gets forgotten in the cracks. And then when you rise it back out, it's been a lot of fun.
I'm glad to hear it. That's cool.
It's awesome. So we have one more work topic that we want to discuss, because last December we found out that Chris Metzen was returning to the WoW team after about 6 years of retirement from the company. Mm-hmm. And now I wrote this interview before we got this past week's news about Chris's full-time
surprise
director level. He's back in the big chair, right? Mm-hmm. Now, even just like outsiders or just people who've been following Warcraft or WoW for a long time, like we know that Chris is one of the architects of Azeroth, right? He's one of the guys that really stood up the whole fiction. I mean, again, everything in games is collaborative. It's a team effort, and nothing gets done by one person. But obviously, Chris was a guy that helped build what this is and build up the team to begin with. And I mean, you and I have had private conversations, and you've spoken publicly about Chris being kind of a mentor of yours. And even just a few minutes ago, you mentioned that with his departure, that sort of sparked like that you wanted to get onto the Warcraft team specifically to help kind of be that steady hand, that guiding presence, like keep stuff Warcraft, right? Like keep it true to Warcraft. Yeah. Like just to kind of take up part of that responsibility, right? Because it is a responsibility, I guess, to shepherd a franchise like this over decades at this point. But so, after those years of him being away, he's back now, and now he's all the way back in and in the driver's seat. So what's that whole process been like, and what's it like working with Chris again in 2023?
I mean, I was really excited. I think working with Chris on my first day at Blizzard Entertainment, I walked in, having moved from Seattle, Washington, walked through the gate. I have a badge. It opens the door. I'm still baffled. I walk down to the map that says where my office is, and I find that my office shares a wall with Chris Metzen's office. One wall between where I'm sitting and where he sits. And outside of his office was a whiteboard with the map of Northrend. This was during vanilla. A map of Northrend written in whiteboard, dry erase ink. And I'm just like, I can't believe that I'm here. And I think throughout the years, working with him was always a joy, just because he has this energy and enthusiasm. And I think in terms of resonating energy, I think on the same wavelength at times, as far as just get geeked up about what we're doing. This is cool. And I'm like, yeah, I think we can just fly at the same radiative wavelength and enjoy that. And it was really hard. It was really hard when he left. I think earlier when you asked, is there any story that you've told that really came from internal? And the only one that I feel even got close was when Anduin went back to the Broken Shore and he reclaimed the blade, and that came not long after Chris had left. I think that was the first cinematic that he wouldn't have actually like had some level of supervision. Like everything that I had made, Chris would have seen, reviewed, had thoughts on. This was the first one without him, and it's literally about what are we supposed to do now? Right. Like, like I don't know where to go from here. So I think that was very, very reflective of kind of how it felt at that moment in time. Like those were some big shoes being left, and I didn't even want to get near them. Right. Like I didn't have any delusions of like, I want to step in it. No, like that would be terrifying. But I think at that time when he did leave, it felt like, to me, I wasn't done yet. Right. There was so much more to do. There was so much more to work with. Right. Like it just, why? Why here? Why now? And I just have felt ever since the moment this happened, and I lit up and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is happening. It just feels like a second chance to be like, all right, what was left unsaid? What was left unspoken? And I know that some people are feeling like, okay, does this mean that we're going back in time? I don't think so at all. I think that this is only moving forward. I think that there's, an energy and an excitement around what Chris really does bring to the equation whenever you work with him, whenever you're around him. And that's like, he just wants to get to the heart, the true essence of what excites people, of what moves people, of what gets people going, right? And then he always tries to pull everything we're doing back to that center apex, and it's wonderful. And I've been having a grand old time of it.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, we're obviously interviewing you. The only reason why I wanted to make sure we had room for the Chris question is because, like, I know from just the relationship that we have personally, like, I know what working with Chris has meant to you over the years, and I thought it would be, it would be appropriate for us to kind of get into it a little bit, because
good opportunity to make a statement. Yeah.
I mean, he shaped your career certainly, and he shaped our experiences with the game as players. So, but experiences with the game is something that we wanted to get into a little bit now, because this is our anniversary episode, right? And so we want to kind of have some fun too.
Taking a tour,
just talk about playing games and stuff. Now, when we had you on years ago, we talked about you as a creator, as about the fan to pro journey kind of thing, getting into jumpstarting your career with Blizzard. We talked a bit about like, how did you get into games, and how did you did you play Blizzard games before WoW or whatever? But we didn't. Right. We want to get more into sort of like MMORPG and WoW experiences. Right. Like, were you into MMORPGs before WoW? I mean, that there was a kind of a crowded market there for a few years in the late 90s and early 2000s. Like, were you into them, and which ones grabbed you?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is probably too much in many regards. I think that, funny enough, it's very timely that Baldur's Gate, the first one, came out in 1998, and that game captivated the heck out of me, and just went all the way down the rabbit hole and enamored with everything about it and its storytelling. People sometimes don't really understand that games in the 90s didn't have a lot of bandwidth to tell broader, deeper stories. They were usually very surface level, and so having something that went all the way down the rabbit hole was like, this was novel and refreshing and exciting, right? And I think that primed the brain that the following year there were two dueling MMOs that came out. EverQuest is the one that everyone knows. That was in early 1999, but at the end of 1999, Asheron's Call, a lesser known competitor, came out, and that one grabbed me. I was all the way down in playing Asheron's Call for several years, thousands of hours, right? There was something captivating, particularly around the notion that not a lot of games at that time, you had an infinite horizon, kind of like the image behind me right now. Video games hadn't yet done that, where you look over there and I can go there. I can run and I can see what's on the other side of that mountain. This was novel at the time. This was not something that people have had an experience with in games yet. And so getting that experience and just falling in love with being in this world. And it was funny enough, in this world that we created our RP characters and our campaigns around Voldegar and Leodov that ultimately were transplants to World of Warcraft that ended up being the characters that were in the Return mission that got me my job at Blizzard. So it all actually spines back to our first times playing in this game. And then as a fun little tidbit, I recently learned that I was playing on one server it was the only free-for-all PvP server that they had on there where anyone, could punch anyone. If you had a guild, it's because you just, not punching the people next to you. But that was one server with a very finite number of people who played on it. I learned that Mikey Barra was playing on that server at the same time. And I had actually encountered it. The character in game was just Mikey, which didn't know was Mike Y. It's Mikey, right? But we had literally been running around on those servers some 20 odd years ago. And that was just like, so,
did you ever kill him or grief him or anything?
Oh, he was much higher level than me. The man is hardcore. But I don't recall him ever griefing me. I don't know, maybe. But that primed it for in the years following. I played Dark Age of Camelot when that came out. That was enjoyable, but that was, I think, ultimately my own interest, short-lived. And then World of Warcraft came about, and I had known it was coming for a while. I had loved Blizzard games ever since. My first one was Warcraft 1, and I played that and I loved it. But the one that really threw me down the rabbit hole was Diablo 1. That thing came out. I got a copy for my birthday, and I played that game until I lost sight. Just the perception of reality. Trying to get that godly plate of the whale. Yes, and so just knowing that I had already fallen so deeply for this genre, and that Blizzard would be delivering an experience of bringing Azeroth to a world by which I could run over the hills and explore and see the Eastern Kingdoms, and see Kalimdor. I was anticipating it from the moment that I learned of its existence. And I was in the open beta, and I was playing it with my friends. And I was there. I was at the midnight release, even though I wasn't from California. I was living up in Washington State. I was at the midnight release of the game in Fountain Valley on the night that it went live to get my copy of the game. I just happened to be visiting my mother for Thanksgiving, which happened to be 11/24/2004. And she drove me down, and she stood with me in line all night to get the copy of the game. And she bought a copy of herself for herself later, and has been playing ever since. But yeah, that's kind of the backstory there.
So what was your first character that you sort of hopped in on and explored this world with?
It would have been Leodov, the character from The Return. I played her as kind of a spellcaster in other games, and in this it was like priest. I want to play a priest, and so made her a priest. I ended up almost immediately my earliest screenshot that I have, because I still have. I've never lost all my screenshots to a hard drive crash. So I have one screenshot of her, and she's not in the human starting area. She's a human in the gnomish starting area at level 6. It's because all my friends started gnomes. And so I was the one that jumped on the tram and got up to level up.
How were you not the gnome? They infected you with the gnome?
Because I picked priest, and I was playing this character, right? Yeah. Like, but you know me. You know me. Mm-hmm. You know me. Gnomes are everything.
So what about those early game experiences like really stuck with you, like hit you the hardest?
Oh, it was almost always exploration, and playing with friends, right? Going around that corner that opens up into, Valley of Kings, or opens up into the heroes, the statues in front of Stormwind, and the music's blaring, or get on a boat, and then the loading screen, and then the anticipation of boom, what's next? And then out of the fog, emerges yet another completely unknown space, and just, I remember I'd spent all the time in the Eastern Kingdoms, and I was just so excited because I would look at the other side of the map, and it was still all in the fog of war, and just knowing that there was still so much more to see, and so much more to go in and find and unlock and unravel. Like that was my principal compulsion in playing MMOs to begin with, and that was the good stuff.
Once you ended up getting hired by the company, did that end up changing sort of your relationship with the game in any way, or?
God, yes. Yeah. I think when I said earlier about eating all the candy and getting sick, the first time I got into a Burning Crusade dev build, I want to see everything, right? And I flew all over the map, and I got into every corner. But what that did is that the game came out, and I found myself with a completely different set of feelings, right? I'd seen it all. I'd been in every corner. There was nothing left, and that's kind of the tragedy of being a creator, is that you'll never see your work through the eyes of people that didn't see it until it was done. You know how the sausage gets made. You know the good times and the hard times and the challenging times of what went into that. And that will always, right? When I think of the Wrathgate, man, I think of blue screens of death. I guarantee you, no one else is watching the Wrathgate and thinking of blue screens of death except for me and my friend who worked on it with me. But yeah, it's complex psychology there.
So you talked a little bit there about how your perspective changed, right? But like, now that you've been doing it for so long, are you better at not doing that sort of dev kit flying around, seeing everything? Like, have you changed you learned from that?
Yeah, no. I find myself wanting to, I have to know what I have to know to do my job well and to be informed, right? But I don't have to go off and, spoil myself on things that aren't essential to what I need to do what I need to do, right? And so finding some balance there. And also just as time has gone on, like I have found the truth is that I'm enjoying WoW the most when I'm with my friends, right? And so when they're there to play and, then I'm playing with them and we're enjoying just as we were all the way back then. I just saw one of the friends I made in my guild in vanilla last week. Because at that point in time when we first met, he was 18 years old and now he's working at a game company around here. And we got almost 19 years later, got dinner, right? And there was a funny anecdote with the fact that because I played at midnight on day one, there were only 3 Pacific Coast servers, PvP servers. And so it was like BlackRock, Frostwolf, and I don't know, Archimond. I'm trying to remember. But that means that the hardest of hardcore were all conglomerated in those servers. And then as they were rapidly bringing other servers online, it was still, those were the ones where the people that were there in minute one conglomerated. And as a result of this, when I started that first day at Blizzard Entertainment and I walked in and I sat down, the guy behind me turns around and says, "Oh, by the way, I'm so-and-so," and gave me his in-game name. And he had been in my guild for 2 years. Wow. And it just shattered my head because I'm like, what? Like, there was actually a reason, because, they got in the first servers, in minute one as well. But I actually ended up learning that like 3 or 4 of the guildmates that I had been running around the game since February of 2005 were Blizzard employees, and I just never knew. Including one of them who was the voice of Mr. Smite. Oh wow! Landlubbers are tougher than I thought. Wait, you're in my guild?
What a legend!
Oh my goodness,
legend! Yeah.
All right, so we're coming to the end of our time here, so we want to do like a lightning round about WoW. So, what is your proudest moment or achievement in the game? Or maybe if nothing jumps to mind is something you're proud of, something you had the most fun with.
Right. I think in terms of classic, as hardcore as I ever got, during Wrath of the Lich King, my mage who had been Arcane, and no one believed that Arcane was good because they didn't know how good it was after 3.0 came out for the moment in time. I was raiding 25-man Naxxramas with a guild that, just picked me up. And we took it all the way into the end to farm, and I just had never gone that hard on current content, cutting edge content. And I ended up being the first to get the blade off of Kel'Thuzad because I had been the number 1 DPS on this guild doing 25-man Nax, and that was like, oh, I finally feel like I can retire, and I kind of did because I never raided that hard ever again. So that was kind of my all right, I've been there, I've done that. I had my full tier 7, right? Every piece 25-man version. I was just like, this is as sweaty as you could get right now in World of Warcraft, and I'm good with it. I think I don't need to don't need to worry about that all that much more. Yeah.
That's funny. That's about the era where I started getting sweaty myself. I stayed a little sweatier than that, but yeah. Yeah. All right. What is the hardest you've ever laughed during a WoW session? Can you remember an incident where you're just cracking up?
Okay. Funny that you say session because I think it's hard to remember thousands of moments in World of Warcraft, right? But my sense of humor is just every time someone say gnomes or goblins, they just walk out and they just explode for no reason whatsoever. That's basically picture perfect, like my humor. And it's why we made those, it's one of the reasons that contributed to those shorts we made. That was the Lemmy and Krosel, the goblin versus gnome marketing that we did. It was just, Acme Looney Tune stuff. And then when I got the opportunity to direct Junkertown for Overwatch that one time, that was just hyperbole of explosion. So that's my humor. But you said session, and it made my brain instantly think of how I was in the VO session where they had the actor say, "Hey, we have a robot. Do you think you can do this?" And then he's like, "Sure." And he just busted out this voice, and he ended up being, XT002. New toys for me. I heard that live out of the voice actor's mouth, and everyone there was like, "Oh my!" So yeah, in terms of sessions and WoW that made me just crack up, like that would be way the heck up there.
That's amazing. Okay, favorite raid instance, no criteria, just whatever comes to mind.
I really liked Siege of Orgrimmar. It was formative because of all the story that we really, around Garrosh that started coming around. I thought it was a great amount of gameplay diversity. I ended up tanking that in LFR with every tank. My Druid, Death Knight, Warrior, blanking on the others. Monk, Paladin. Like I fully tanked LFR, leading the LFR grade with all 5 during that patch. And it's just like, because I just couldn't get enough of it. So
just doing the yeoman work, just helping all the LFR.
Just getting people's queues. People's queues. Like I'm trying. I'm using every cooldown I have. I'm using every lockout I have to get people through their content. Yeah.
Well, we've hit that 1 hour mark, so we want to thank you very much for joining us for our 600th episode. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and letting me just talk about some stuff that I don't often get to. Oh yeah, let's chat. This has been great.
And we'll see you soon at the BlizzCon, which will be the fun thing. So
it is really soon. It's astonishingly soon. It's coming right around the corner.
Yeah. So we'll say hi then. But thank you again. Appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Man, I always love talking with Terran. I am so glad that we got this chance to sit down and talk with him. Big thank you to Terran and everyone over at the WoW team who makes these sorts of things possible and happen. It was wonderful being able to catch up and learn more about what is going on in his life and how evolving positions have happened. Some of those anecdotes are great. Some of the stories are great. So thank you again. For tagging along and being able to actually help out the show by participating in our episode 600. I mean, that was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Terran is one of my favorite people that I've met through this whole journey that started back in 2004 for me with World of Warcraft. Right, like such a cool guy. He's always been so incredibly generous with his time to us, to our show, and I talked to Terran in person at BlizzCon 2019 about having him back on the show soon.
Yeah.
We had him back on the show. It wasn't real soon, but it's been a real turbulent time. Like obviously we get home from BlizzCon and kind of blinked because it was the holiday season, the end of the year, whatever. And then 2020, the world changed, and then everything has changed since then. There's a real time warp around there. And, but as much as I would have liked to have him on earlier, I think having it line up for the 600 special ep was great. And also so much has changed around his role in the company, which I thought was really interesting to dig into with him. And also the timing was just very serendipitous because we found out just a few days before we were set to record about Chris Metzen being all the way back in on the Warcraft team specifically.
Yep.
Back in the big EVP chair and steering the ship. And, we've had conversations with Terran, publicly and privately about, Metzen being such a mentor to him and everything. And so it was great to be able to get his kind of gut reaction to having Chris back on a team and being in a room with him again. I think it's such a cool moment for Warcraft and for fans of the fiction of Warcraft. yeah, just again, just like a privilege, and thank you to the Warcraft community team and PR team for working with us to make 600 special. And yeah, there's no other word to describe it except a privilege to be able to just chat with Terran about whatever, man, about his work life, and then to kind of dig in with him a bit about who he is as a player and like what excites him about playing games. All that stuff is all part of it. That informs who he is as a person and how he approaches the job, and how that job has evolved over the years, and telling the story of what is Warcraft, and how does the story of this setting get expressed to players. It was it's always a real treat. I could just listen to him talk, man. We could just turn the mics on and go, so Terran, just talk to us for an hour, and he could just go, like we don't really need to point him in a direction, because he's such like an effervescent kind of personality. He's so passionate about what he does, and he's so passionate about this stuff that it's like infectious. So yeah, I'm so happy we had a chance to sit down with him again after quite a few years. I mean, the last time we had him on the show was, I believe, in like early 2018. So that's a long time now by my watch.
Yeah, it's been a very long time, and man, oh man, it's just 600, right? Like it resonates that's just like that actually happened is remarkable to me. And we didn't do anything massively huge for 500, but 600 has been quite the ride, man. I dig it. It's right before BlizzCon. We are about to go out and see people. It was neat to be able to tell Terran, like, yeah, I'll see you in a few weeks. Like, that's just like that is a crazy thing to be able to do in those moments. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you again, everyone, for sticking with us for episode 600 and up to this point, and supporting the show. Means a lot to us. I mean, I'm going to do the usual spiel. That's going to wrap up episode 600 of the Starting Zone. If you want to check out the show, you want to do more?
I got to hit you with some trivia.
Okay. Oh, wait. Okay. We got a lightning round. What do we got?
Yeah. So, okay. We took over the first episode that we produced together as a permanent host of the show was 165.
Oh, it was close. I said 163, didn't I? Oh, man.
Yeah. So 165 was the first one, which is many, many episodes ago. So now this is 600. 601 is already in the can. So we produced 436 episodes plus one in the last a little bit more than 7 years, I guess. The first episode of Starting Zone was March 2009, which means, March 2009 is when episode 1 came out. Wrath Lich King days, Mick and Jesse. That means that
it was like first year university for me. I was like,
right,
man.
Yeah. So the show is approaching its 15th anniversary, so we got to think about that for springtime, I guess. But that also means that we took over about 7 years into the show's run, and we've been producing it for about 7 years now. So we are now half of Starting Zone, which is super weird to me, because the show had been so established when we started getting involved in it, and when we started, and then when we took it over, it was an institution in WoW podcasting, and in an era when there were a lot of WoW podcasts around. There aren't as many WoW specific podcasts as there used to be. And, Starting Zone is kind of the one that has weathered all of these storms and different changes with personnel and everything. And, to think that we are now half of the show's entire lifetime run in terms of calendar time, in addition to being 2/3 of the total run of episodes, is very weird to think about. My first episode on the show was 106 back in March of 2015. Don't listen to that episode. Would be my advice. Like, just don't bother. But yeah, so that is a very long time to be in the orbit of the show. Now, I'm not totally sure about your first episode, because I may have this wrong. I think it was 116 in May of 2015, but I'm not positive about that. You may have been on the show earlier than that. I don't know. I was just digging through Libsyn and trying to see what Mick's notes were. So either way, like, we're looking at spring 2015, I think, or maybe slightly before, for both of us, like, first appearing on TSZ Air. which is a super long time ago.
So
now
it was 116. I'll add that. And it was me being introduced as Sparker Bouncy because of the Google phone call, for those who are curious.
The old Google text to the Google voice to speech to text thing that Mick and Jesse used to do.
Those who don't know, one of the things sitting on my shelf behind me in all those episodes, if you ever tuned into the video format at all, is a box that sits over my right shoulder. That's a little box that is the Warlords of Draenor signed edition by all the devs copy, like not a collector's edition, just like a normal box version of it. And I won that by submitting a story to the Starting Zone with Mick and Jesse, which you had to submit by calling into Google Voice and then telling a story on that. And so I did this, and Google Voice is such a wonderful product that it translated that voice to text so they could read it on the show. And of course, my name, Spencer Downey, came in as Sparker Bouncy. So yeah, that was how that sort of originated back then. And yes, I then eventually came on the show with Alt and Mick Montgomery, and was able to chat with them about stuff back then. And man, like I the nicest thing about having this time capsule that is a show is I can go to thestartingzone.com and type in /EP116 and it pulls up the episode with all the notes and everything, because ages ago I went through and actually made sure all the archive was updated. So this exists. You can go and check out the episode if you want. It's back then.
Yeah, maybe don't do that either. I mean, it's probably better than 106, but yeah. So along those same lines, Mick, in his infinite wisdom, had the foresight to first put us on the show together 121 June 2015.
All right.
This was the era of Mick. It was sort of like Mick and Alt was like the main show, but because of time differences and scheduling differences and just overall the way the show was constructed, sometimes Mick would be like, I want to do an episode this week. I need somebody in the orbit of my co-host to be on here. And so he, that was the first time he put us together, and we appeared on the show with Mick quite a few times in between June 2015 and eventually in August of 16 when we took it over, which was August 27th of 16 was the posting date of the first show that we produced. So all told, we've produced roughly like 38,300 minutes of TSZ content since 165, which is roughly 638 hours or over 26 days.
Okay.
So we're getting close to the point where you could listen to just Spencer and Jason TSZ episodes for a month straight. We'll be there pretty soon. Like if you really wanted to do that for some reason. I have two more little tidbits here for you.
All right.
Longest episode. You may know this just from doing the posting, but what do you think our longest episode was, or at least like what era it was from?
What era it was from? Okay, longest episode era was probably from Battle for Azeroth. It was probably one that involved at least one, if not two. Oh no, Josh Corbett and you on TSZ. Did we run like 2 hours and 40 minutes or something? Did that happen? Is that what it is?
That's a really good guess, and we've definitely done some long-ass episodes with Josh Corbett, who I love dearly.
He's great.
Josh, if you're out there listening, we appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
But that's a really good guess, and off the top of my head, I would probably guess something like that too, like some kind of 3-chair situation or something at least.
Yep.
Our longest episode was 508, which was 3 hours and 4 minutes long, and it was about Zereth Mortis and Sepulchre, the first ones, that patch, and the first wing of LFR. Somehow that ended up being a 3+ hour episode about Shadowlands Year 2. I was shocked. I'm not sure why that episode was so long. I mean, it was a big patch, and there was certainly a lot of stuff to talk about. But yeah, that was the longest one I could find that we've ever posted. It was
501?
3+ hour. 508.
508.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm curious now. I mean, I definitely know the LFR guides can be chunky, right?
They can go long, especially for Sepulchre bosses.
Yeah, Sepulchre was really tough too for a lot of people to get through. Man, yeah. So we taught that was that for those who are curious. That was Mists of Pandaria Time Walking Week. The world boss was Oranamonos, the Tyrann in Ardenweald, getting that fervored incantation, surging shots, and verdant infusions for people who were trying to collect their legendary stuff back then. Man,
that was a fun system. Yeah. I missed that.
And it was a fortified, bursting, storming, encrypted week that week. And Darkmoon Fair was happening.
Not bad. Pretty good Keystone week. Yeah.
But yeah, it was Raidfinder Wing 1 going live, and it was the save the date future of World of Warcraft blog post that had come out that they were talking about what was going to be happening.
Oh, that was a Dragonflight reveal.
Yeah.
That's what that blog post was about.
Yeah. So that was where we sort of started to get the hints of what was coming in Dragonflight, and I can understand how that episode kind of exploded out to being longer, because I'm willing to bet that we had our weekly rundown, which probably ran 40 minutes or 35 minutes, and then we did about 2 hours, is my guess, on trying to cover the first week of Sepulchre, because it was brutal the amount of stuff that was happening in there. And remember how hard that raid was. Like, you really needed to get down and dirty and explain stuff for people to make sure they understood it. But that's a slog, man. 3 hours is so. And this is those fun anecdotes, right? If you go back and you check the early Legion episodes, when we were first starting out making the show, we really wanted to be sure we were making a show that was concise and really fit the need that we were wanting to deliver to players, which is what's happening right now in the game that you can do that's going to be fun. Because we're tired of hearing people say there's nothing to do in World of Warcraft. So let's just make sure that we just get this information out. Let's make it as short as we can and get people excited and pumped about the game. So some of those early episodes were like an hour or 45 minutes, hour and 15 minutes. Like that was like our range was 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes for what we want in an episode.
Now, a lot of 38-minute episodes in those 2016 days, stuff like that. Yeah.
And it really came down to let's just get as much information out as fast as we can. And we expanded that, right? We received the feedback from our listeners saying, hey, we want to know what you guys are doing in World of Warcraft. And so then that added on, as opposed to the show kicking off, us doing, hey, how's it going for 3 or 4 minutes and then kicking right into what's going on this week. We now spend that extra 10 or 15 minutes or sometimes 20 minutes talking about what we did. And then we get into it. And so that suddenly added that extra 20 minutes or 25 minutes onto the show, which then pushes it out to an hour and a half, which is where we are sort of sitting comfortably now. And some of our episodes push up closer to 2 hours, depending on the amount of news, but that's the maximum amount. 3 hours is a slog of an episode.
I'm going to guess we had a lot to say about 9.2 first impressions and stuff. I mean, probably that would have been first week of Sepulchre rating too, because LFR Wing 1 would have come out the Mythic Raid week, right? So that would have been first 2 weeks of patch plus first week of rating. But I sometimes the show just needs to be long, but that one was kind of iPod. It was so much longer than anything else.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to do episodes that are that long either.
It's something that we don't talk about a lot on the show, but I mean, I'm very introverted as a person, and so I don't talk a ton. It's not like something that I do on a regular basis, engaging and talking and doing stuff with people. So typically after an episode of TSZ is recorded, my voice gets kind of shot in the sense of it's the most talking I will do for 3 or 4 days is, what I do inside TSZ. And it's one of those interesting experiences to feel that exhaustion kind of kick in of, hey, I'm doing something I don't normally do all the time. It's like, exercising a muscle you don't regularly exercise. I do it once a week, sometimes twice a week, but that's about it. It's not like a daily occurrence for me. So it's an interesting thing to put out a 3-hour episode and be like, all right, man, I'm going to the bathroom. I'm getting some snacks. I'm going to drink some water for a bit. I'm not even going to bother editing this right now. I'll look at this in 3 hours when I feel better. That is entirely something that has happened after these episodes before. When you get long like that, man, oh man, it's a task. And, I am still happy that we do them. I'm happy that we get the content out for them, and it's just there is a toll physically on doing a podcast like that for sure. It is something that you can sit down and bang out and have a good time and talk with friends, but it will take a toll on you as far as just energy wise if it's not something you're used to doing.
There's also the weird thing of like the hole that your brain falls down while you're recording a podcast. Like I will not remember most of the stuff that I'm saying right now, even like an hour from now.
Oh, right.
And like we just talk. We have the format and we have like the notes for what we want to go over and we talk about that. But then people will be like, hey, that thing that you said on the show was really interesting or really stupid or really funny. And I'm like, I don't know what it was. So tell me what it was and then we can talk about it. But, so one other trivia tidbit I have for you. This is funny. Kind of. The first episode that we began talking about the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard was $4.99.
Really?
We rolled over 200. We rolled through all the way through the 500s. We were in the 400s. Now we're in the 600s, and it's still not closed. So, I mean, it was January of 2022, so it's coming up on 2 years. I mean, like when they announced it, they said at the time, like, well, we're targeting June 23 to complete the transaction.
Yep.
But still, that's a lot of episodes. We were in the 400s technically still back when that whole thing, the news broke and that whole thing started. And now we're all the way into the 600s and the deal's not closed yet. So I thought that was just kind of funny as I was going through stuff. And that was the first time I saw Microsoft stuff pop up in the notes as I was going through the feed. It was $4.99. So there you go.
Man. Yeah.
It's been quite a few episodes since 2015, man, when we first started getting in here with Mick.
Yeah, and the relationship that we built with Mick has always been one that's been really wonderful to have, not just from a friend, but also, mentor in some ways in the content he was creating. I went on to do a comic book podcast with him, and I went on to sort of participate in some other shows with him, and it's been a really wonderful ride along the way. So, I mean, he's someone who I'm going to be poking and just saying, hey, I know it's like a 2-hour drive for you, but just FYI, Jason and I will be down in California at BlizzCon. If you want to come out and meet up and, get a burger or something, let us know, because we'd be happy to meet up with him. And yeah, he's great. I certainly, wish him all the best. And I'm so glad that he set us on this path. I certainly had been considering whether or not I wanted to do a podcast. And, when I started doing this, I was already helping out with Convert to Raid with Pat Crane and those folks over there. Not just in the guild and starting up CTR Guild, but also behind the scenes with the podcasting side of it a little bit as well. And it had certainly crossed my mind that I wanted to make my own content, and to have Mick go, here's a platform that's already established. I'll help you get it set up and get it going the way you want, was really wonderful. So I'll always be grateful to him for that. That was something that I appreciate very much.
Absolutely. I mean, we obviously wouldn't be doing this without Mick. And yeah, without Mick and Jesse starting the show all those years ago, and carrying that banner when they both had to stop for a variety of reasons. I think we took the obligation kind of seriously.
To be clear,
we had the show to live on,
Yeah, Jesse left because he went to work at Legendary on the World of Warcraft movie. Just like, I want to be clear, that's why Jesse left at that time.
Yeah, he's a VFX pro, so he had to leave because he was working on the Warcraft movie. And Mick, the door opened in the games, and that's a space Mick really wanted to be in, and he had to go. And we didn't want the show to die because we felt like it was valuable and, it provided a lot to the people that cared about it. We wanted to keep it going. And, it was a long time ago now, man. I mean, there's people who we hear from in the Discord or whatever who literally don't know the Mick era of the show. And that is so weird to me, like not in like a bad way or anything, but it's very strange. We were kind of mixed guys when we came in. It's like, oh yeah, Mick was sort of the guy that introduced us to the audience, introduced us to the community, introduced us to the company, to Blizzard and everything like that. So, it took years for us to kind of grow out of that, I feel like. And so it's kind of funny now being all the way out the other side of that. And there's people who don't know about those first 164 episodes, right? Like, it's been a really a really interesting ride for the show overall, I think, from day one. And I'm happy that, we took it up. We took up the mantle from Mick, and I mean, I remember, he threw it out to this Slack that we had that you and I still use for business stuff. And, he was just like, listen, I got to go. I have this job opportunity with Riot, and I'm keen to take it. And I can't do this anymore. And if anybody wants to pick it up, please do. I'll help you out with the transition in any way I can. And I messaged you. I mean, we didn't really have much of a relationship at this point. We like being on the show together, but that was it. I was just like, man, if you can run prod, like I will help with creative or whatever else you need to do. Like we'll keep it alive. Like let's do it.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah. Having Mick on the phone with me. I was at work on a lunch break on the phone with Mick, and him very much saying like, hey, if you're going to do this, do it with Jason. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not really sure. And like, Jason and I hadn't co-hosted a show together. I hadn't run a show before. What is this going to look like? And it really just came down to, like, sure, I'll give it a shot. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? Let's give it a try, and totally worth it. So appreciative. So yeah, I just want to thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think any of us really thought like, oh, well, we'll be doing this for as long as Mick had been doing it. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what my expectations were going into it or whatever. I just wanted to kind of keep the show alive and just kind of establish a platform and have a conversation and, have a community around it, hopefully. And, I don't think like in those days, I don't think I would have been like, well, my goal is to produce, almost 440 episodes.
It wasn't at all
in 7 years.
Yeah, no.
My goal is to produce 3 times the amount of episodes that Mick did, or to work on the show for the length of time that Mick did. Like that was not it. It wasn't really like what I set out to do. I was just like, yeah, it sounds cool. I don't want the show to go away. Let's do it. And then here we are, all these years and episodes later.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jason, if that's the trivia, I'm going to do the wrap up.
That is all I got for you. I'm sure we could come up with some more, but that's everything I had prepared. If anybody wants to write in or hit us up in Discord with some trivia, please do.
Oh yeah,
we're in a reflective mood here.
We are. That's going to wrap up episode 600 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, head on over to the Starting Zone podcast on Twitter or on Discord or on the interwebs, and you can hop in and find the podcast there. If you want to email us and ask a question, you can also reach out to us on Gmail. And if you want to get your hands on some TSD gear, you find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/the starting zone. And Jason, if folks are finding you, where do they find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald, at least for now. As long as it's still free, then you can find me over there. You can also find me on Blue Sky if you look hard enough. I'm not really posting over there, but I do have an account. And you can also find my video channels over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. Going to be kind of dormant while I'm traveling and away from my home and my PC and stuff for the next month here or so, basically. But hopefully after BlizzCon, we'll get that stuff started up again as well. So come say hi in any of those places.
Yeah. Trying to find me. You can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey, over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD, or on YouTube at youtube.com/@SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, and a big thank you to all of our patrons, thanks for listening, and jobs done.